dive in. All
Okay.
right. So let's begin. We'll start with one of the previous questions and then we'll see what comes through in the chat. We said we'll talk for about 30 minutes. We'll see how we're feeling, how everyone else is feeling. So I'm just going to let ourselves be led.
Sounds great. So let's start with something simple that came through before we entered this space. And it's, do you have any thoughts on how to deal with chronic fatigue?
I do, actually. So, here's the thing. This came up when the question came up, when I originally saw it, someone posted it on Instagram. There's many different ways to look at chronic fatigue. Okay. I always look at it through the lens of energy because that's what I see. And one of the things that I notice with people who deal with chronic fatigue is that the light in their field is dim. Okay. And oftentimes they have a compromised aura. And I am sharing this also, this was me for many years. One of the things that's really important when you're exploring why you might have so much fatigue, there's so many different reasons, but oftentimes it does begin energetically. One of the things I've noticed with my clients who come in with fatigue, chronic depression, things that really their field is weighted down. Oftentimes what I notice is that there's a narcissist in their life. It's a really important first place to start because what happens when we have a narcissist in our life and we're not aware, right? We might not even use that language, but we know that there's somebody in our life where we feel really depleted after being around them. We feel very defeated. And depending on how good your boundaries are or are not with that person, you have to think about narcissism as basically some souls, human beings who have unintentionally sometimes decided to take other people's life force. Okay. So one of the really important places to start with chronic fatigue is, do you have any narcissists in your life? And then you can also start exploring your lifestyle habits because there oftentimes will be things in your life that you could boost the vibration around. The food you're eating, the content you're consuming. You have to remember, we talk about how when we start, we get distracted and unfocused, we scatter our energy. That's another reason why our field is lacking light, is lacking life force. Okay. The more sensitive you are, the more of an empath you are, which most people who are probably tuning into my vibe are empaths. The more you're like a sponge absorbing other people's stuff. So with chronic fatigue, I'll tell you how I got it. I mean, sometimes I fall back into it a little bit here and there because I gotta, I'm feeling a lot. I'm feeling a lot. But I've strengthened it quite a bit by strengthening my boundaries, like my energy boundaries. We put that shield around us, like that's really important. That's not just woo-woo stuff. It's really ensuring, it's like you're telling the universe, I want to stay protected. And so it's important to reinforce that boundary around you. It's important to clear, empty your field, empty your field. It doesn't have to be long or complicated. And then if there is a narcissistic relationship in your life, it's something you have to confront. And, there's many different ways to deal with that. I had to cut people out because of it. That is not always necessary. If you can figure out how you can maintain your element of peace and your energy, then that's great too. But that is something that we have to learn. Many empaths do have to learn that. So it's part of the training.
That was a really detailed answer, and it sort of answered a question that had come through about the link between narcissistic people and the dark entities. So
Yeah.
maybe you can talk a little bit further about what are dark entities for people who might just give us a brief subtext of what that might be for someone who's new to that language. and how does it really attach itself to a narcissistic person specifically?
Yeah. So, okay. So it's a bit of a complicated answer.
We'll take it
Uh,
nice and slow.
so, okay. We'll start off with this reality, this 3D reality, okay? So we all come in, we are light beings, we are from source, and we come in to this density. It's almost like, we come back into forgetfulness and we come in to this sense that we are these separate beings, from one another, like we're not part of this whole. And in this 3D reality, it is the foundational piece is duality. Okay. There is positive energy here and negative energy. All right. And it's all a part of this experience. It's an important part of this experience because if we were dropped into just light, then how are we going to like go through Earth school? That wouldn't be fun. It would be, we wouldn't have anything to do. So we are dropped into duality so that we have to experience the opposite of who we are. We have to experience negativity and learn and remember through experiences to come back to the light, to come back home. And I talk about these two currents that run in this 3D reality. There's a current, the ascension current, the ascension path that takes us back to remembering, back to our power, back to sovereignty, back to being limitless, back to source. Okay. And then there's another current going the opposite way. I've spent many years there, and it's a current, it's a stream that's pulling you into forgetfulness, into victimhood, into powerlessness, into whatever the opposite of sovereignty is, being controlled, not being not running your own life, and fear, the opposite of love. And there are beings who are in that current. And when they're in that current, they want to drag more people into that current. And they're not necessarily physical. They're not necessarily in human form. They live in the astral. And again, it's not scary once you start just realizing that this is Earth school, that there are negative entities that are trying to pull you into that current, into that Earth school of dissension. And And what happens is there are light beings, and this is important to understand. There are light beings who just get bombarded by negative entities, and then they become narcissists. And this can be really confusing because we can forget that underneath all of that narcissism, there is a light being, a light soul who has just gotten so deep into a hole that they can't climb out. When you see people who have lost themselves to addiction, when you see people who have just completely abdicated any responsibility for their life, they have just chosen to be a victim. And I'm not saying that judgmentally. It's just they have chosen to not take responsibility in places where they could. And that just opens them up to be to have attachments. And those entities, they want to keep us in lower states of consciousness. They want us in forgetfulness. They want our vibration low because it's easier for them to attach to us in that way. So one of the things to think about when you're dealing with a narcissist is, first of all, narcissism is a spectrum. I have personally in this lifetime been on the spectrum of narcissism because I also had a lot of trauma earlier on in my life. And when you have a lot of trauma, your life gets really small and you just become fixated on trying to take care of yourself and to feel safe. And sometimes that can be at the expense of being aware of other people and their needs. And so, yes, I've even in this lifetime had significant entity attachments. And you could probably define me as a narcissist at different points in my life. But then it was the path of starting to take responsibility in my life for me and also start developing my heart, right? And confronting things and forgiving myself where I could start raising my vibration, raising it to a point where we don't get pulled down so much. Okay. So I know that's a really complicated answer, but
Well,
I
I
think
think much of what we're talking about today is going to leave us thinking about more, and there will be opportunities to continue to ask follow up questions, whether in the chat space now or if people reflect on it further, they can continue to email you questions and know that the conversation doesn't stop here because it is a complex subject for sure.
it's complex. And I will say this, there are some souls who have, they continually come in as narcissists. They're like, and they can be what we define as psychopaths, right? It's also important for you to listen to your intuition because um, culture does not say it's okay to cut people out of your life. I'm going to tell you, if you feel unsafe around somebody and it's like there's like a tornado around them, and then if you get anywhere near them, you're sucked into their drama. Like, do what you need to do to take care of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll just continue on the same kind of subject line of entities because there were a few questions around that, and we'll segue a little bit into when we're out and about in the world as light workers or just as people in our regular day. How do we protect ourselves, or what is it on how do we move through the navigation of entities? So if I go to the city and I come back and it's like you almost feel something on your back, what's the best way to continue to just kind of clear that and make sure it's not in our own field?
So there's some spiritual teachers or guides who will say, don't ever tell people to protect themselves because right there, you're making them powerless. I don't agree with that because you have to be truthful about where you are on your path. If you're dealing with a lot of trauma, if there's a lot of stuff you're still processing, if it's hard for you to center yourself and, if it's hard for you not to be distracted, you do need to ask for protection because the entities or the negative energy you're going to be more vulnerable to it simply because the medicine or the answer to not having negative energy attached to you is to become more present. Like that's it. Like it's as simple as that. Like the more present we are in our daily moments, and this is why we have to be careful about how often we're going on social media. That is such a temptation. I mean, it is trying to pull us into distraction so that things can attach to us. It's all, it's all connected. And that's why when you go into social media, sometimes the way people are talking, like they're taken over in that moment. You can feel it. You can feel when people are charged and reactive, and it doesn't even feel like them anymore. So I guess the best form of protection long term is to really work on becoming more present, connecting with the heart space. That's why we do it every Monday, because the more you connect and activate your heart, the more you raise your vibration. And then what happens slowly as you're becoming more present, you're paying more attention, you're taking more responsibility and accountability in your life, is that you start naturally gravitating towards higher vibrational food, higher vibrational content, higher vibrational people, and you start just like more often getting into that stream, which also helps with protection as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And Kathy asked a follow-up question on it that makes sense for this moment is how do we know when we have an entity? What does it feel like, or what might we be feeling when that happens?
So this is what I'm going to say. The short answer is, like I will say that so many times when I have a session with somebody, I'm like, do you think you have an entity? They're like, yeah. Because there's something that doesn't feel like like, what you feel like, what love feels like, what light feels like. And what it feels like when you can't connect with that, and when you're feeling weighted down and you're in a negative pattern or a negative cycle that's self-sabotaging, that's always a good indication.
Hmm, those are great ideas. And if we feel like something is waking us up at night, is it necessarily a negative entity? And how do we feel the difference?
No. So this is also part of building our discernment, which is an important initiation on the path. This is also why developing the heart is so important, because the heart is going to be what allows you to have that clear discernment. We can't have clear discernment just from the analytical mind. I mean, no way. So we have to develop the heart so that we can start processing information through the heart. The heart will be the cleanest, clearest way we see things. Okay. So what happens is people understandably, may not be in a part of their path where they've developed their heart, and entities will start coming from the light, from the dark, wherever, and they're trying to get your attention for various reasons. It could be your higher self. Maybe you're so distracted during the day that the higher self wakes you up at 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. because that's the only time that, there can be some type of awareness. And so part of it is to start tuning into the vibration, like learning how to read energy, because you'll know if it's a negative entity, because if you can get out of your kind of ego reaction, because your ego is going to tell you it's probably something scary, and you can just pause and drop into the heart, which takes practice, then you'll get the information like right away. Like you'll know it's your angels or your higher self, or you'll know that it's something that you need to clear. Now, let's say it is a dark entity that comes into your room at night and you get that hit. I just made a post about this recently. Again, it's like the same thing, which is you just drop into your heart. Your biggest your best response to that is just become present. And then if you feel like you need a little bit more support, call in your angels, call in Archangel Michael. He's a great person to call in situations like that. And then you just got to trust it's going to be cleared. Okay. This is where we start building our faith too. The universe is inherently benevolent. It supports and it magnifies our intentions. Okay. But we got to let go after we set that intention. So your intention is to clear your house. Okay, now let go and move into faith.
Roy, you said call in our angels and guides, Archangel Michael being one that would support that moment. What if I don't know the names of my angels and guides, and is that all right? And can I still access them?
Yes. So this is another, people get really stuck on specific spiritual gifts. Okay. So let's say that your prominent spiritual gift is not clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. That's okay. Like we also are clairsentient, you can feel, all right? So you don't need to know your guides' names. You don't need to know what they look like. Like that is just like, that's not important at all. And there's no hierarchy in how all of that is, how you connect. It's just that you can start feeling it. Okay. You can start feeling it. You can start feeling a presence around you. And they only give us names because of our small ego minds that want names. Like they don't really have names, and it's okay if they do. Like my guides have given me names, but like we don't need that. Like we just need to feel their presence and to start trusting that they're around.
So it's okay to name them ourselves, maybe.
It's okay to name them ourselves.
Have some fun with it.
Yes.
I didn't lead with that. I am the cosmic comedian, so if my humor comes through just a little bit, I want to take things a little less seriously here in this space, and in general, I think we're not meant to take things so seriously. We're meant to really just have fun with everything. So I'm going to invite that into the space a little bit with some of my comments, and hopefully I don't offend
I
anyone.
love it. I thank you for that too, because there's one thing I feel like people get really intimidated with how to connect and like how to develop their intuitive gifts. And it's because they think there's all these rules. And there are, there can be specific mystery schools and specific ways to do things, but that's just one way. You can be playful and you can be, unique to you in how you're connecting and what that looks like. Like I offer recommendations, like clear your house, like, bring some light in, some people are like, you have to smudge, you have to do it in these certain ways. Like, sure, or not, like whatever works for you. Your intention is the most important part of all of this.
Definitely inviting the imagination, which I love about you. You have an ability to be so imaginative with the work that you're doing. And you teach that in a lot of your teachings. I love the one that you have where if you're inviting people into your home and you could describe it a little bit for us, but the door hanging to help clear energy. I think that's a great one. Maybe you could share that with us.
Yeah, so you just put like those
Like
like
those beads, right?
beads, like, and I feel like college, I don't know why it's like, do we have those in college? But those beads that you walk through in the door, and you can put that in every entryway. Like, so children get entities, okay? They get little attachments. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very normal conversation in our household where Theo comes home and we're like, you think you have a gremlin? And he will say yes or no. He knows when he has a gremlin. And we were noticing that there were some days where he was coming in not feeling like him. And so we actually put one of those, I mean, they're imaginary, they're intentional, a beautiful beaded white light entryway curtain. And so no matter what, whoever walks through it in our house gets a clearing so that they're not bringing in, whatever it is not them.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of a playful way to just ask for what you need. Yeah, something so simple, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So, to kind of shift gears a little bit, but I really know it's all connected, why does it feel like right now that old addictions or old patterns are coming back? And, if you could speak into that energetically, why that might be taking place?
Yeah, so that's been coming up too a lot recently. People have been two things. One is people have been concerned that they're not on the ascension path, because they feel like if they're looking at their life today, they're making choices that they know are not supporting them, and they're seeing kind of old things kick up, old habits, old coping mechanisms, old addictions. That it doesn't matter at all. Like, if that's happening, it doesn't mean that you're not on the ascension path. First of all, your intention to be on the ascension path is all you need. Is your intention, okay? And then through that, you start paying more attention, you start taking more responsibility, you start raising your vibration through different activities throughout the day, becoming more present. But what happens every once in a while, especially based on whatever's happening cosmically, if we've been in like a big surge of activations, people can start drowning in those, and because they're not integrating properly, because they're, who knows what's going on in someone's life, if they have children or they have a stressful work situation or whatever, and they're not able to take moments where they feel like they can't take enough moments to center themselves. What happens is they can get really backed up, and they can stop feeling like themselves. And yes, sometimes it makes them more vulnerable to entities. But then what happens is then old coping mechanisms start coming up, and that can be a few different reasons. But one of them, most importantly, what I've noticed why these kind of addictive patterns start popping up is because you're actually changing, like you're actually growing out of them. And it's like this desperate plea from you to not go into the new. It's like you're afraid to grow. Like you're like, no, 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 let me just kind of like, go back into this old pattern so that I can just stay in like comfort and knowing. But it also can be a huge indication that you're actually like shifting. And it's just kind of like a last hurrah before you move out of it. Like, I have personally experienced that. So yeah.
For sure. I think also with the old patterns to add on to that, I think a lot of the times we're faced again with old patterns in if you think about time and how it moves, right? So in my world it's infinite, but it's always coming back. At some point it comes back to this place where we're trying to remember. And so I feel that when we're given the opportunity in those patterns again to do it differently, to make a different choice, it's presenting itself. And as we're growing, as we're ascending, as we're taking in more light, as our vibrations increasing, we have a different answer, or we have just a little bit more knowledge in our hearts to do it differently. And so that's what helps shift the change too.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that we are never the same. Like we are shifting every moment. Like if there's one thing that's constant is nothing's constant. Nothing, everything is changing. And so when something kicks back up in your life, you're not the same. Like you are approaching it with much more awareness. And partly that might be why the addiction feels louder to you because you're just more aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like this whole process of ascension requires so much grace and self-forgiveness.
For sure does. And gosh, you certainly said it right. You did mention a little bit about the incoming energies. They're certainly strong. And I know it's going to continue to get faster and it's just going to become waves and waves of energy. So, a couple questions here within this, and we can shift into it. But when those frequencies are incoming, what is the best way to manage all of that incoming energy? Is it to be still? Is it to move through? And how do we know the difference of when, if we know it all?
Part of dealing or managing the incoming energies is to understand your personal nervous system, because we each have our own unique nervous system that's holding a lot of information from the past, a lot of reactions and coping mechanisms. And if your reaction when you get overwhelmed is to shut down, okay, that's mine. I mean, I've shared this many times, like going to bed was my safe space. And there's some chunks of my life where staying in bed, like I would have done that all day long because that felt very safe to me. Um, so it's partly understanding how you react, because some people go into freeze, right? And they start to feel paralyzed when these frequencies come through. And in that instance, you need to figure out for you what's going to get you more into movement. Um, Oftentimes it needs to be gentle, but it can be something as simple as a walk. It can be something as simple as just taking your shoes off and connecting to the earth and grounding. But then if your reaction is to get kind of combative and you move more into fight, like you get really activated and you get really reactive, um, then it's, trying to figure out how to, like let go of that energy. It's like it's in you and like it needs to release, and so oftentimes that can look like physical activity. It can look like screaming. I am a huge fan of primal screaming. Like really, like get into your car and scream. Like I can't tell you how much energy can move when you do that. So I think just to kind of recap on all of this, it's really to understand what's happening to you in that moment with your nervous system and then having the right tools. I like to think about, like for me, sometimes like going into meditation and being still is not available to me.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, then that probably means that I need to be more physical. I need to do something more physical. Maybe being physical is not available to me, then being still is the best thing for me. So it's just really, it's this whole thing, like the whole ascension process has this beautiful design to it where it's just getting you to pay more attention, tuning in. Sometimes it's about feeling something, like something's trying to like surface and you don't want to feel it. And it's like, okay, just go sit in the lawn and just whatever it is. And here's my biggest recommendation for feeling things. People don't want to feel things because they think they're going to be pulled into something that's going to drown them, like maybe there's a memory from your childhood, maybe some trauma. There's so many ways that we can feel things. And I recommend learning, and it takes some time and it's a practice to feel things without putting a story to it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a practice to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but you can do that. And it's such a beautiful way to get something to move without going back into the trauma of it. And then just by getting that thing to move, you actually alchemize and change the energy around that past event.
I was just going to ask you how important it is to name it. And you just answered that. And part of the practice that I bring into sound healing is the importance of not naming whatever it is that's coming through in your physical body, because it detaches you from that feeling, and it really creates the space to release it fully. So I think really not bringing the mind into that space, and our mind wants to participate, and that's okay, right? I mean, we just have to have some grace with that. But yeah.
I always think about like with the mind, right? And we don't want, it's like we're not trying to like vilify our mind, our ego mind. First of all, our mind is not just the ego mind. Our mind is also where we get intuitive information. So, but there is the ego mind, there's the analytical mind, and that mind, that ego mind is just, it's got like a narrow focus, which is to keep you small and safe so that everything's predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And that can cause great suffering in our life, because it interferes with us connecting to our purpose and our path and moving into the unknown. But the thing with the mind, the ego mind, is that the moment you bring word, like you bring like a story to what you're feeling, you are pulled into the past. You're no longer present. That is not where you want to start processing things from. You want to process things from here and now. So you want to stay really present. You want to drop into your body, feel the ground, and then guilt's coming up. Okay, I'm going to feel this guilt. I'm not going to attach the story to where the guilt is coming from. I'm just going to feel it. It's like I'm turning the volume of it up, and I am courageously like confronting it, and I'm sitting in it, and I'm allowing myself to feel it, and it comes up, and I stay in my heart, and I stay really present. And then what I'll notice is it just starts to melt away. And then whatever the original trigger was, next time around, it will be less activating, because it's like you're melting an iceberg every time you sit in it with presence.
And how is that experience different, say, if you were to spend some compassionate time with your younger self to heal that past? How is that experience different? Because we are bringing our mind to that moment, but we're not living in it. We're helping our present body to heal that younger self. So can you tell us a little bit how that's different?
Absolutely. So your inner child, the best thing, the most healing thing for your inner child is for you to go to them present. Like you're not going to go back, like you're not going into them. You are the present parent that they need. Like the more you can show up for them present, centered in your heart, the more they start believing you that you are their person. And when they start believing you, they don't need the people in their life, in their, the imperfect people in their life, to be anything other than who they are, because now that your inner child has you, that's all they need. So there is so much powerful work you can do by getting really present and going to visit your inner child.
Absolutely. And what role do you think the breath has in all of this? So we talk a lot about the heart, the compassionate heart. What is the breath in all of this?
Well, the breath breath is life, right? And the breath is such a powerful aspect, because what it does is the breath is always in present time. This is why just taking a moment to find your breath is such a simple way to become present. And so not only does the breath just bring you into the present moment, it gives you a place to anchor your focus, but it's also the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. It's the way to be in both at the same time. Because here's the thing, is that we don't want to just be in the spiritual realm without being in the physical realm at the same time. It's not actually safe. This is why, and we can get into a whole conversation another time about plant medicine. We're going to see a huge, and we already are, we're seeing a huge resurgence and, opening of people doing psychoactive medicine. it's so important that we are having somebody hold space for us if we're doing that, who's staying in this realm, in the physical realm. This is, again, talking about entities, talking about opening ourselves up. It's just really important. It's like you want to sacredly park your car, which is your physical body, and um, have an awareness of where it is so that you're not just popping out. This is why alcohol is so destructive. You're like just leaving, you're just leaving, and there's nothing sacredly, protecting you in this physical experience. So the breath is a beautiful way to access both.
And do you think that, just on that subject, we have the ability to create the safe space if we were on our own to go on that journey? So you said to have someone who's in this realm to guide you on that. Do you think that we have the ability to set that up for ourselves prior, like with a prior ceremony, with
Are we
our
talking
guide,
about,
with our guides, with our angels?
are we talking about plant medicine?
Yeah.
That's going to be a case by case basis. Here's the thing. I personally think that plant medicine can be a beautiful way to deal with really deep trauma. But there's also a trap in it, because sometimes we kind of talk about not taking responsibility. Like at some point, we need to learn how to connect to these higher realms of consciousness just through us. But again, this is about tuning into where you are in your process. Um, I think whenever you're kind of exploring that, I think it's really important that you do have a guide. I think that it starts to get into this hairy territory of being recreational. And that's also, something to be considerate of.
All right. I just love the word Harry.
I,
So
I don't know
we're
where it
just
came from.
Oh, I love it. We're just going to shift into, we have time for just a little bit more. How are you feeling? Do you feel like you can take on another question or
Sure.
two? Okay. And if there's any questions that go unanswered, again, we'll have an opportunity to get to all of them eventually in another time and space. So a question that came through is, it's kind of a statement and then a question. We're in a very supported time energetically, I believe, for light workers to be supported, and things are happening super duper fast, like at rocket speed in our timeline. And what I mean by that is, we're energetically supported. So when the floodgates open and the energy's just coming through and opportunities are being presented and we're just like feeling it all and we're feeling energized, how do we stay focused?
So we're assuming that when we feel energized, we're not focused.
Well, I guess when opportunities present themselves in multiple forms, so right, we're always asking for guidance, but sometimes things come like super hot and heavy, right? They just come through really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's through work opportunities or friendship opportunities or social opportunities or wherever it's coming through, right? Sometimes it just feels a buzz. So it's
Mm-hmm.
how do we stay focused for what might be right for our path or at this time, if we're feeling like there's a lot of opportunities for yes out there.
Okay, so here's the thing, and this is why we start moving deeper into faith and trust. The more we start letting go, it doesn't mean that we don't take action anymore. What it means is that we're paying enough attention where if we take a little bit of a wrong turn, we're going to get that feedback immediately. Okay. So what happens is it's not that all of a sudden we're like so, enlightened and everything is green lights and like we have no obstacles or challenges. It's not that at all. It means that we have started to learn how to have a conversation and a dialogue with the universe, and we're paying attention. And so we do still try, do trial and error. And sometimes we're following a yes that we will take, and then right away we will see for whatever reason that wasn't the correct way, but we're paying attention. So we're getting that feedback so much faster than years ago when we were more on autopilot, where like what would happen is years ago, like for myself, I was so checked out and so unpresent that big things would have to happen to get my attention, like huge things. And I don't think I'm not there anymore. Like things are, it doesn't mean that life is, just gravy, because that's not the point. The point is that we become steady amongst all of the interesting energies here. But what happens is we're paying enough attention where we can maybe follow something that lights us up, and then maybe it's not the right timing, or maybe it's the conditions are not exactly, in alignment for us. And then we'll get that feedback, and then we'll pivot, and we'll just take it as a learning, and we'll take it as part of our training. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense. And just to add on to it, you said everything. I would just add that those yeses are experiences and lessons in a sense, right? Even if it turns into like something that is a closed opportunity, there's something that we've again gained from that experience of saying yes to something maybe that we wouldn't have said yes to before because we were in a different place, right?
And maybe your higher self was encouraging you to take that little like, detour, just so that you could gain that discernment or gain that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so at some point you get on your path, and you're like, there's really no wrong ways to do this.
For sure.
Everything is training, and everything is learning.
For sure. I think we have time for one final
One more.
question.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And we'll go with we're in a place right now where unconditional love is totally necessary. And with so much noise and people noticeably in fear, whether it's on social media or in real life that we're experiencing people's reactions and triggers, what's your best advice on staying in that place of unconditional love and those moments and staying in your heart?
Well, it's not easy. We are human.
Mm-hmm.
Are also a part of the collective energy, right? Like, it's interesting because part of what we are meant to be learning is how to be in the world, but not of it. And it doesn't mean we're bypassing, and it doesn't mean that we're not acknowledging what's happening in the world. It just means that we're not allowing the frenetic energy to pull us down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's a practice. But one of the things that I am very committed to, even in my own life, is we cannot have unconditional love until we have love for ourselves. And I cannot tell you how much our mind throughout the day, our ego mind, is critiquing all day long. I mean, I think maybe some of us know this, but like, we have to start paying attention to that track that's running, because that's actually dictating what's our vibration more than anything. Like, if you want to understand, like, that term resting bitch face.
Yes.
I
Well,
had
yes, I do.
a friend who told me that their son was like, Mom, you have a resting bitch face when you're driving your car. It's that's important to understand, because that's who we are. Who we are on autopilot can be an indication of the vibration that we're at. So we have to start paying more attention of what's happening while we're driving our car. Like, what mood are we in? I check on that all the time. Like, sometimes I'll like be in my head about something, and I'm driving, and I'm like all of a sudden worried about something. And then I pause, and I'm like, okay, let me neutralize that, right? And I neutralize it by feeling love. I'll just feel love. I'll connect with my heart, and I'll just kind of breathe out that worry, because I realize that the more and more I can come back to myself, come back to my heart, be present, the more I'm paying attention to me in a productive way, not in a self-absorbed way. That's love.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know when we say self-love, like, people really don't know what that means. Like, what does it mean when we say like love yourself? It means check in with yourself, pay attention to yourself, like notice, the way you're doing things, and is there a way to bring more ease and peace into your life? It's really about paying attention to yourself in a loving way, in a way that you would a child. the way you would speak to a child, like speak to yourself that way. And so that's the biggest way I see that we're going to move into unconditional love, is just first and foremost by laying the foundation of love for ourselves. And I really mean that. I mean, most of us haven't learned self-forgiveness. We haven't learned to forgive ourselves for being imperfect and for doing, not so great things when we were less conscious. And so we have to start forgiving ourselves and being kind to ourselves. And then we start to see that spill out into the world.
Beautiful. So always continuing to come back home even when we're unsure, it sounds like connecting to the breath, and you always
Yes.
remind your followers connecting with your feet and your heart and coming back home.
Yes, exactly. It really is. This is what coming back into wholeness. Like, we have to learn who we are beyond our survival mode, beyond our cultural conditioning. Everything that happens when we come into this world, almost everything, is pulling us away from ourselves. And so we have years and years of learning how just to be so distant from ourselves. And then some of us start to have crisis. And usually that crisis is a wake-up call showing you how far away you've gotten from yourself.
Absolutely. Such a good reminder, and really we've covered so much, so I know there's a lot to integrate here, and I think it's great that you're going to post this on your channel so people can even come back to it. And I know I find when I listen to things a second time through, there's like a nugget that's there that I'm like, wait, I didn't even hear that, or you just have a different presence. So I want to invite even the few participants who joined us live to tune in again and just see what else is in there for you. So thank you for holding a space,
Absolutely.
Roya. I'll leave it to you
Thank
to
you
close us
for
out.
Thank you for your amazing presence here. I love you, Susie. And if anyone wants to just take a moment just to center ourselves, because we were up here, and let's just find our breath. Let's find the floor. So just feel your connection to the floor. Feel your heart.